so just first question I'm going to throw at them, and then we'll see what you guys have, is what stands out as the importance of the changes that these new standards are calling for, the next generation of science standards. What stands out to you as something that's really important in terms of the changes? So any of you can start?
Well, the thing that jumps out to me is this idea over and over that you're not just learning facts out of a book, but you're doing science the same way scientists do. And I think that's just awesome.
I agree. In specific content, there's a lot more of planetary science. So it's not just Earth, but planetary science. So that's a big change, I think, for a lot of teachers, an area where we're going to need to learn more. And then I think the other thing is adding in the engineering perspective too. So it's science and engineering from the beginning, from preschool forward, is a big change.
Yeah, totally. Doing science is really important. I think it is important to realize also that there is still content, but the content is now learned through doing science. We're not abandoning content, but we're having them do science to learn science.
I guess for me, it's just I don't have to memorize. It's not about memorizing facts. Actually, it's about asking questions. The students asking me questions. That's it.
We've got a burning question you want to toss at them?
Well, thank you for showing up.
How do we train? You talked about you're teaching the content within the practice, but how do we get the teachers that are so used to the content to not let it go, but make sure it's in there? So we'll do this great lab with the kids, and well, that was great, that was fun time. Now let's get to work. Like, no, that was the work. You know, how do we get that? How do we bridge that gap?
Well, as an administrator, that's my responsibility to make sure that my teachers get that professional development, whether I send them or bring it, but I can't expect them to just learn it by watching a video, obviously. I've said that many times. So I think that is the first thing. I have to teach my teachers to go out to and practice and bring it back. So I think that freedom, but first, professional development for my teachers, and then I have to stock those classrooms. Because I think a lot of the times teachers don't want to go out and spend their own money to buy materials. Teachers, am I right? Am I right? Right. And those of you who are going to start paying back your tuition. So money, making sure that I am providing, stocking their classrooms with things so they don't have an excuse to not do it.
And there is, for elementary, there is a need for us to look at it in a more integrated fashion. So if you look on the CaliforniaNGSS.org website, there are, just the NGSS.org website, there are example bundles. And those are really nice because I know that as an elementary school teacher, sometimes we tend to think, well, I'm going to do life science, and then I'm going to do earth science, even if they say, well, now it's earth and planetary, and then I'm going to do physical science. And we can't really think of that anymore because scientists in the real world work across these fields all the time. So a biomedical engineer is combining life science with engineering things. They have to know a lot of physics. And we need to teach our scholars to be the inventors and the problem solvers. So that means for us not doing a lab that we know, but teaching them tools with which they can solve complex problems in innovative ways. And this is more important than ever before. And so that's a big shift. So to get teachers to do that, we want to show them the boundaries of the new standards and really get them to do some hands-on things themselves. And that's why working together, like my team, prepping these hands-on experiments is hard, right? And that's what stops people. It's hard to do labs. So what we came to do is rotate. So I prep the lab for all 3 classes one week, and then my colleague the next, and my other teammate the next. And it really frees it up. And we don't necessarily go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I say, I like 2 and 3 and 4. You wait and do 5 and 6 and 1. And we're flexible that way just because we're like scholars, right? We have favorites. We have things we like.
I think if I'm understanding your question, you're talking about some colleagues who will want to make sure that the students know every stage of mitosis. They still think that's the important
Because
thing.
the argument will be, you're going to send them off to college, and they won't know the material.
That's right.
Even though they got it in the phone.
I have colleagues just like that. I know what you're talking about. I guess there's a couple approaches you could take. One is take them out of their science world and say, okay, think back to your history in high school. Do you remember all those important dates that they taught you? Try to get them to think, when your students are out of high school, are they actually going to remember? Because they won't remember, the details of the stages of mitosis. I'm also hoping, as we start to move more into the new testing, is it CASP? Is that the name of the new testing they've got? Okay, the CASP test. And they'll realize, oh, there aren't a lot of facts in there. They are asking our students to do science on the CASP test. Also, hopefully, we can get some support from the university level. If we can start having our colleagues realize that university professors don't want them to know every stage of mitosis, but want them to be able to do science, to design experiments, hopefully some of our colleagues will be better convinced. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So just on that note, I would love to ask you, what would you, as a college professor who works with these young physicists, ask of us in K-12? What do you want? How do you want us to have prepared them? What would be your hope?
Well, there's a couple of things. There is some content that if you don't know, you're going to be struggling. The students at Cal State Fullerton come with a wide variety of backgrounds, and you have to keep the students who have seen a lot of this before engaged, while also bringing everyone else up to speed who isn't there. I think seeing all these inspiring talks, I'd say if you could send them with a love of science, maybe that's a tall order, but you can learn mitosis, or you can learn how to take laws of motion later, but if you come in with a good feeling about science and how it works, that matters a lot more. I think working hard means a lot more. If you could get rid of this idea that doing science means you're some smart old guy sitting in a room by yourself thinking deep thoughts about the universe, and get this idea that anybody and many people do science, anyone can do it, and it's the process, which is one thing I'm so excited about, learning about these new standards. I think that's way more valuable than any one bit of content. So I guess that's what I'd say.
Oh, that's so nice to hear.
Question in the back?
Hi, so this is more directed towards Mr. Inman, but within the high school spectrum of science, what is the transition like, especially that you're incorporating all these sciences and cost-cutting concepts, and knowing that high school has been traditionally very discipline-specific, how have you been able to, because I know you're a life science type of guy, but how have you been able to really incorporate the different types of science within your classroom?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because that's an ongoing question that my district, at least, is dealing with right now, and I'm wondering if it's the same for other districts, is trying to decide, are we going to blend everything together, or are we going to keep them in our separate silos, so to speak? And I think the most important thing is not so much whether we teach them independently like that, but we try to make the connections between them. And that's where the cross-cutting concepts strand is so important, that we go back to these cross-cutting concepts again and again so that they realize what they're learning now. Oh, it does connect to what I've learned in other classes. So I'm not going to come down on one side and say that it should be taught multidisciplinary or multi-science disciplinary or into separate sciences, but whichever way you're teaching it, it's important that the students realize that what they're learning now in one science is connected to what they're learning in other sciences. Does that answer that at all?
Yeah.
Cool.
Others?
I don't know if this is necessarily a question that any of you can answer, but I have a hard time understanding how to read the NGSS. Is any of you care to give us a clue on how to?
Do you have a couple of hours? Once you understand the architecture, it's really not that hard. But you do need to spend some time understanding the way it's all been put together. Once you see it, it all falls apart. You see how they've combined the 3 dimensions. I agree with you. At first glance, it looks complicated. It looks a lot more complicated than the old standards. It really would take a little while to explain it, but once you see that they have put those 3 dimensions into every performance expectation, it becomes a lot easier to read. Can you guys give any further help in?
I would just like to say that the California Science Framework was adopted, and so when that comes out, it's going, I've seen the draft copy, and you can look at that right now if you just Google California NGSS Science Framework, and that is very helpful. There are narrative sections that really show the shifts and ideas, sample lessons, and wonderful appendices for all learners, for children with special needs, for English language learners. And so I would go to the framework first and then pull back out. But we've been on this journey, all of us here, for about 4 years, going on 5 years. I feel like I can read it now very well, but it is a new language, and that's why we need to collaborate to help each other.
I had 2 things, and now I've forgotten them. Oh, yes. Go to the California Science Teachers website and look at the way they're presenting the NGSS, because they'll sort of take you back a few steps and make sure you can understand the way it's put together. Also, there are NGSS rollout sessions, which would be a great thing to go to learn how this whole thing is structured. It really, once you see the way it's structured, it makes a lot more sense. So try one of those.
And I just want to interject on that note a couple of things. A, there's a resource for NGSS for teachers that we've put together electronically that will get out in about a week or 2. So you all signed up for this. We have your emails. We'll blast it out to you. So that's part of this Better Together effort. The other is that we have at Cal State Fullerton, and I'm sure at many other universities in the area, we have folks who are doing this work. Just as at Discovery Science Center, Janet was actually one of the authors of the framework, right? So Antoinette Linton, wave, a colleague of mine in secondary ed, she is our resident science education expert. Those of you in the credential program and single subject know her, but she also has some resources that can help you with digesting, processing the framework. And what I love about what you just shared and what was inside of your talks is that this idea that teaching is not about taking all my knowledge and now I'm going to throw it all at my students and hope something sticks, right? So it's not just shifting what we're expecting of our students, it's how we as professionals act with each other and within our profession that we're always learning, right? So I love the quote from, I don't even know which of you, I think you all said it in some different way, we're all learning. Wow, I learned something today. I learned about the moon phases. I learned something about gravitational waves I didn't know. I learned something. That is what a 21st century educator is about. It's about being an excellent learner, so we're helping our students become the same. So, other questions?
I'd like to, in addition to what my colleagues have said, I would like to make a connection. Academic discourse right here. So noted. Thank you. Don't be afraid of it. Janet was the one who taught me not to be afraid. I would ask Janet a question because I really didn't understand science. But give me everything else but science. But Janet had this way of presenting, and I still didn't know what I was doing. But I could ask a question, and I knew from Janet I was never going to get A, B, C, or D. And when I learned that, I kept asking more questions. And I asked more questions. And Janet would go like this. Well, what do you think? What do your neighbors think? Let's dig into this. So I knew that it was okay to ask questions, so I just wanted to come up with another question. It was a safe place to do that. And so when my students can ask me a question, I do the same thing. Go, well, what do you think? What do your neighbors think? And I think we as teachers need to take that same approach that we're asking our students to take this leap into the new science. Same thing, just take a leap and to start somewhere, and it'll build. And know that no one is an expert right now, but you will be. Right? If you go to Cal State Fullerton, you'll...
So I've noticed that when I work with older students regarding science, they are used to the memorizing facts way of learning science. So when we introduce more like an inquiry-based type of design and they're challenged to create something and be engineers, they kind of stare back with a blank face because they've never had to do that before and they're nervous and scared. So I was just wondering, what are some of the best scaffolding techniques that you guys have used to make children see themselves as like those engineers and scientists?
I guess I would say start easy and start fun. So like in my second day in class, I have my students designing their first experiment. I give them a challenge, design an experiment to test this hypothesis. Give them a bunch of equipment, some of which is irrelevant, and make it fun and easy to start. And they'll realize that they can do that. And then you can give them more challenging things after that, but start it fairly easy and fairly light.
You have older students, first grade.
What grade are you talking about, though?
I've been working in 5th grade.
Okay, so I think one thing I would do is, go ask a first grade teacher or a kindergarten teacher. It's great to do this sort of big buddy, little buddy experiment. And so part of it is they already are in 5th grade, feel maybe afraid to fail, or they think they have to have a right answer. When the reality, we were talking before tonight, or earlier before we started, about how wonderful inventions come from failures, and that's really mostly how it goes. And so we want our scholars to know to fail fast, which is what young children do, right? They drop the cup down, you pick it up. They drop the cup down, you pick it up, And so we know it's in them, but if your 5th graders were paired up with kindergartners or first graders, and then you talked to your 5th grade scholars and said, you know what, we are going to be science ambassadors. We're going down to the kindergarten. They have to do balls and ramps now. We were going to have so much fun. We're going to give them the junk, and then you teach them. So you're telling to them, now remember, we want them to explore, we want them to test and retest, so we're going to use encouraging words and fail. So then they will totally get into that. It'll shift their perspective, and it'll just open up their world a little bit. And then the next time you do a project for them, I think you'll see a shift where they'll be a little bit more freely creative with it.
So I have older students in my classes, I guess, for this room. I agree with a lot. I mean, I don't have nearly the same expertise in teaching, but in my experience, starting fun, showing something awesome, like when I show my students free fall and terminal velocity, I show them a video of some skydiver who dropped his camera out of a plane, and then it landed in a pig pen, and the pig came up to eat it, and then they found it and posted it on YouTube. So that's good. But the other thing that works for me is they can't stare blankly at you if they have to talk to each other. And anything that can get them, moving their seats, talking to each other. Like I'll ask them to vote on a question. I always emphasize there's no dumb question, and it's okay to be wrong. And you don't lose points if you're wrong, but I'll have them vote, even in a big 90 student class, and then they'll try to convince each other. And a lot of times they can explain to each other better than I can.
I know my 5th graders, are my tacit people here? All these little bags that I said we'd take, and when we created these experiments or activities, we always did a tour. We always invited the other classrooms and their teachers. And then we'd have, can we do that? I want to do that. And so then their teacher like, how'd you do that? So, well, ask the kids. So then the 5th and 6th grade kids became teachers for the teachers.
Yeah. So I'm from Japan, a science teacher. So I've been elementary school and then junior high and senior high. So now I work for the university biology teacher. So I'm very impressed about this meeting. So everybody's so energetic, and please give some comment because usually I feel it's very difficult to teach my students because usually I not teach, but I want to think. I want them to think about the issue of the scientific issue. But they ask me answer usually. So how about in United States? Oh, the same or not the same? They want to think more and more, or so I would think I would just think, but it's very difficult. They want to give the answer. They want the answer from me.
I think one of the things to try is to use something like project-based learning, where there is no right answer. So you say, I can't give you the answer. There is no one right answer. You have to develop your own model, and there's more than one right answer. So they'll stop seeing you as the authority who's going to have all the right answers, and they're going to realize, oh, they can come up with their own right answers. So try some project-based learning, which are, take several days and have them investigate something a little bit more complex. And tell them, there is no right answer. There's lots of wrong answers, but there's no one right answer.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think for those cases where there is a right answer, it's important that they, like I love those examples that said, gather evidence that supports this. Sometimes there is an objective reality and there is a right answer, and sometimes there isn't. And for those times when there aren't, choosing yourself how you want to do it is awesome. And for those times when there is one right answer and we really have learned something, seeing the evidence and the thought process and how you got there is way more important.
I see a couple of my kindergarten teachers here. It's also my place to help teachers become better teachers. And so this year when I'm in their classrooms, I'm looking for how many things? 2 things. One is I'm looking for how and why questions. Go ahead and tell them 2 + 3 is 5. Give them the answer. But you have to ask them a question. Why? Explain. Show me. Tell each other. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Find someone you disagree with. Then they go out and have a conversation with 15 other people. They all agree. But what did I get? I got the collaboration, the communication. I got them thinking and talking. So the other thing is, what did I say? First, you ask a lot of questions. And then the second thing is, make sure the kids do the most talking. If I'm in your room 60 minutes, I want 20 minutes of you and 40 minutes of them.
I think that also speaks to what's valued and how are you communicating what's valued, right? You're just communicating what you value is hearing from students when you're going on these walkthroughs. You're communicating what's valued is seeing students engaged in processes and practices, not generating correct answers and bubbling in A, B, C, or D, right? What's valued is evidence to back up a claim, not just that you make a claim randomly, right? So these processes and practices, if to your question about how do I shift away from the kid be wanting the answer is not what's important anymore. The answer is on Google, right? Google knows everything, or Watson in your case, right? These machines, we've given them all this knowledge, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what sense to make of it. So how are you valuing those processes and practices in your classroom, and how are we valuing it in our education system through assessments? And I don't have an easy answer to that one, but I know the state and many other people are grappling with trying to design better assessments, but also to say one test does not tell us enough about what a child really knows, that we have to have a broader array. And so at least in this state, we have assessment system that says we have multiple indicators of what children know and are able to do that are valuing these different aspects of learning.
Again, I'm just chomping at the bit to add as a literacy person. Right? Notice my students and all the rest of you who've studied anything about the ELA, ELD framework and the Common Core for English Language Arts and literacy across the content areas, that's what they're talking about too, right? Because it's not just about reading the books, but it's being able to go seek out the information and have those conversations and engage in that academic discourse and question and follow a chain of evidence and be able to communicate that chain of evidence. So we no longer should be teaching, here's ELA, right? Here's how I help you with literacy in this content area, and oh, over here now we do science, and those are completely disconnected, unrelated topics. In fact, they're all marvelously integrated with mathematics, with science, with social studies, as you think about issues of social importance related to any of these topics and so forth. So it's just a beautiful opportunity for all of us, but we cannot do it alone, right? I cannot do it myself. It takes my colleagues here. It takes all of you if we're really going to serve students well. So it's just a fantastic time to be a teacher, especially if we embrace one another as we move forward on this journey. So, I think we have one or two more questions. So, Mark, do you want to fix that?
No, you get any question you want.
Dean Kurtman.
I think I just wanted to say how inspiring this is. But at the same time, what really stands out to me is it's about engaging with students more than anything, because I was telling Marie that my physics teacher in college basically told the whole room that if you guys write a paper, you don't ever have to come back and you're going to get a B. And I am not interested, or haven't been interested in science or physics or things of that nature, because I was sort of dismissed in that way, not just myself, it was a whole room of us. But my math teachers were extremely engaging, and I teach math, so a lot of this is also about how you engage with students. And all of you, as much as I thought, one, I'm tired because it's the end of the day, and two, the fact that science is not necessarily what I am comfortable with all the time. I was extremely engaged, and you weren't even, I didn't even have the stuff to play with. So I think for all of you that are teachers in the room, what stands out to me is it's all about engaging your students and making sure that they are participating and understanding and part of what's going on, because it's ultimately what creates successful students. And to me, that's what you've all done up here. I mean, honestly, Dr. Lovelace, I didn't think I had any understanding of what was going to happen in terms of you were extremely engaging, and all I could think is that you should be in the College of Ed with us. You get one or the other, and you just blew me out of the water. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for all of your inspiring conversations.
Give an acceptance right now.
So, my dean is looking very hard at me, so I don't think I can say, I don't think I want to say anything about that, but I did want to really strongly agree with you. My college physics professor, in the first class where a lot of us were realizing, oh, this is really hard, one day he took me aside and he said, you want to know the secret to teaching? It's caring about your students. And without that, nothing else matters. But if you care about your students, and you put in the effort, then they'll learn. And I wish you'd had a physics teacher who believed in that. I did, and it really had a strong influence on me. And I try to be like that.
There's just one thing I'd like to say, say you didn't have a good experience with science growing up, and you love literature. Much as I love to teach hands-on science, I love teaching reading. I love teaching writing. But I can tell you, especially for second language learners or impoverished children, if you want them to read and write, do some hands-on science. Because you know what? They will not stop talking. And after you talk, you learn to write what you're talking about, and you want to read those words. And I have worked with scholars that are second language learners, and they have done hands-on things with circuits and outperformed their ELA scores. So on the science CST, they get a higher score than they do in reading. Why? Because they have that memory, that physical memory, so that when they're trying to decipher the written science test, the old CST, and looking at the diagrams, they muscle their way through it. They persist. And that is so inspiring. And you know what? You can watch a video. If you don't know how to do the circuit, you think, and why should you know? Why? Because your power's going to go out. You should know about circuits. I should know about the moon. And do I know more about the moon now since I was teaching it? You bet. Do I look up more? You bet. Do I know more about the planets? Of course. Will I know more a year from now? Yes. And is that fun? Yes. Learning is always fun.
On that note, play ball! We have a few final things we'd like to say. One of them is thank you so much for being here. We always enjoy our time with you. Another is please thank this wonderful group of third is, we hope that you will join us on the Better Together California Teacher Summit last Friday of July, and Cal State Fullerton will be hosting one as we have the last 2 years. And the fourth thing is, please do give us feedback on that evaluation form, because we love to do events that serve some needs.
And there's extra food on your way out.
Oh,